we can certainly address and improve on the Ag Cluster. Probably the most controversial item, whether you support it or oppose it, is the density bonus. Because of the EIR and the proposal before us, it does not allow us pretty much any room to be able to compromise, which is one of the ways we get things done here in democracy, here at the board, to look at that issue. It's pretty much all or nothing. It's keep it as is or go to zero. That's problematic for me. I have some other issues that are also problematic, and I think that we would be well served by continuing it off calendar with some specific staff direction on some things that, you know, and then certainly I'd like to hear from my colleagues as well. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I've met with a fair number of people. I've gone to, in my district, I would say I have more of the ag clusters than anywhere, both major and minor ag clusters. And I've gone out to the actual ag clusters. I've spent time with people, both residents and planners and so forth. And I still have some concerns and questions that keep me from wanting to make a decision that I'm not thoroughly convinced I need to make today. I think that we could ask staff to meet with some of the planning representatives who've worked on ag cluster projects. I think that that's that's something that would be helpful, and I have talked to some of them myself, and they have some. They've been sincere about wanting to make some changes and seeing that there need to be some changes. Certainly, some of the owners, I guess, who worked on the projects, and then some of the other obvious interest groups from well, even our own commission, like A-Lab, Farm Bureau. I know, the EBC, maybe clusters might have something to do, but I think that there's an opportunity to get more input. We seem to be getting a lot of people who are concerned about whether their input has been sufficiently addressed. As for the issues, I said I'd really like to see this come back. I know that this is necessitating going all the way through the process again, which will be a long time before we see it back. And the next board can decide how to prioritize this. I would hope that we would prioritize it again. But obviously, we need to have some flexibility on the density bonus, and that I know will probably require either a supplemental EIR or starting over. Obviously, the other issues that we've seen some input on are the distance between ag clusters from URLs. Our planning commission said somewhere between 3 and the current 5. They also told, when I spoke to 2 planning commissioners, they said that they wish they had the opportunity to make some general recommendations on the density bonus, but they couldn't. Obviously, I've talked with some others about the possibility of having an authorization requirement on ag clusters similar to the GPA process, so that we have an early sense of whether something is truly a suitable ag cluster project and should go forward into the process or not. I think water is typically the issue that is of great concern in every part of the county, and there should be some mechanism to perhaps certify water. We've heard that the economic analysis is insufficient. Hasn't really, from my own perspective, it's not a particularly useful economic analysis. And those are some of the things that I'd like to see us come back with. And I would say this too, just to be realistic, I think that the issue itself has kind of been oversold for both the opponents and the proponents of what action we might take today. When you talk to some of the people who've been involved and you look at the history of how this has been used in our county, this is not nearly as dramatic a planning tool as some people would like to think. And I think that one of the problems is that we've seen this become sort of shrouded in controversy, and I think that even the actual issues have led to a kind of polarization that I don't think is useful for good decision making. I'm not entirely confident that what we would have to vote on today is the best course of action. And I think that that's important. And I also think that, when we look at it, and I know a lot of people are concerned, we've heard from a lot of you, this board is ending in a few weeks in terms of our formal hearings. I think that I myself would like to see us move into the next year and the next board with a new supervisor with a calmer and collegial tone rather than a polarized and divisive tone. I think it's fair to, I think it's the most fair we can be to our new colleague who will join us, Ms. Arnold. You know, before I joined this board 4 years ago, there was a process that was about an ag cluster, the Santa Margarita Ranch, which I think was a incredibly contentious and ultimately regrettable spectacle, and led to a perception among many that it had been forced through and jammed through. Whether you agree with that or not, it continues to be the perception. I don't want to be part of a perception that, I don't think that's what's happening here. This is something that's been in the works for 3 years. It just happens to come to us late in this term. But I don't want to see a perception that there is a majority of a board that wants to force through something that is perhaps not entirely ready. I mean, I see the concerns on both sides, and I understand that no planning tool is perfect. They have trade-offs, and the trade-offs of this tool, depending on how we're able to revise it, is allowing a certain amount of development on a certain part of land in order to gain a lot of conservation. And that is something that I think we need a little bit more discussion on, and a little bit more thoughtful discussion on. So I'm hoping, I know that my colleagues want to add anything just to staff, and I know we'll take from public comment, but I'm hoping that people will be calmer and perhaps find themselves back into the holiday spirit and such as we move on to a more thoughtful response. So that's what I have to say at this point.